Okay, today we're down to Ecclesiastes chapter 7, which means we're starting the second half of the book. Now, in the first half of the book, Solomon takes things that we think will make us happy in this life, and then he shows us that they really won't do it. In the second half, he's going to take things, not that we think will make us happy, but he's going to take things that really work. And he's going to show us things that we need to do in order to find happiness on this earth. Now let's keep in mind that all the way through the book, his purpose is to show us how to be happy while you're living here. That if this is all that there is, how would you suggest somebody to live? Now Solomon believes in God. He's already invoked God's name 2 or 3 times, but he will end up by telling us that that really is what it's all about. But he breaks the book down. I think it's real neat to understand this. He breaks it down. The first half is he takes those things that all of us believe will make us happy. Now, it doesn't make any difference how many times we're told these things will not make you happy. Every person in here has heard that money will not make you happy. Haven't you? Raise your hand if you're somebody that hasn't heard that. Okay? No, money won't make you happy. Now, raise your hand if you believed that. In other words, when you were told that and you said, yeah, I think that's right. Money wouldn't make me happy. I don't, Then you not striving for it. Nobody believed that. It seems to be like it's something that we have to work on, go through life to try to figure it out to see if really that is true. Now, he spends a lot of time on money in the first section here, showing us that because that is man's greatest weakness. I might ask you, how many of you saw 60-minute TV program last Sunday night? Did you see that? Raise your hand if you did. I'll see how many. I'll take a survey right here. One person. Okay. The interesting thing about that is that Warren Buffett was on there, and he and Bill Gates are the 2 richest men in the world. And so the whole program was talking about him and all the money that he has and how he's trying to give it away, how what is he going to do with it? He's 81 years old. What will I do with it? And so just talking about it, and here it is. It's a great job to do, and he says now, I'm not leaving it to my children because I think if you inherit wealth, that'll probably spoil you. Then it comes out that he has left them a few $1 million, perhaps a few $100 million to spend on their own. But then he gave each one of them $1 billion to give away. Now, here's what I want you to do with this. Take this $1 billion and give it away. Now, that's a big job, trying to give away $1 billion. He has 50 of it, 50 billion. And so he gave Bill Gates 30 billion to take over here to Seattle to try to get rid of. So he still has about 30 billion, I guess, in his bank account. And so it's just one of those things. What do you do when you have all this money? How do you view it? It's kind of interesting. I thought, especially since we'd been talking about it here in class, to see it happen to the richest guy in the world. Well, be that as it may, in chapter 7, we're turning the page. Now, in chapter 7, he's going to tell us, here are things we need to understand to make us happy. He said, a good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. Now, that sounds a little strange, too. Now, the first part, I think we get, a good name is better than precious ointment. Now, precious ointment is worth 2 things. There's 2 values to it. Number 1 would be thank you, Rod, would be the price you could get from it. Instead of putting their money in the Schwab stock market, they would buy ointment and things of this nature to to be able to stow their riches away rather than keep them in coins. So that's one way. The other thing is comfort, that you use ointment every day for your comfort. Now, when you look at that land and you think about the Arabs and living in that dry land, and you see that they need to have oil in their skin and need to rub their skin, they need to have ointment in order to find comfort during the day. So ointment to them was a big thing. It was like providing the comforts of life. Now he said, the thing that is more precious than you even having your comforts of life is to have a good name, is to have a reputation. Now when you look out among your fellow citizens and you see people who have lost their reputation, it kind of gives you an idea that, hey, yeah, this is it. You know, we don't see it so much with our peers, but with other people like Bernie Madoff, what did he lose? Well, we all know how much money he lost, $50 billion. He didn't really lose it. I don't know what you call it. He lost it for all of his investors. And you say, boy, that was a great big $50 billion. Look what he lost. But now, as we think about him, what did he lose? See? He lost his reputation. At one time, he was one of the most admired men on Wall Street. And then when he finally went in and made the confession, then he went to the bottom, and now his name is just a joke. Well, that can happen to all of us. If we lose our reputation, then our name becomes a joke. He said, and the day of death than the day of one's birth. That's an unusual way of putting it, isn't it? So if I were to ask you, which is the best, the day you're born or the day you die? Why, all of us would say, man, the day of your birth is a happy day. I mean, people go to the hospital and everybody's happy, and boy, that's a wonderful situation. The day you're born, that's wonderful. And the day you're dead, that's sad. Well, that's true. That's true, and I'm not trying to change it. I'm not trying to say when a child is born, we all ought to cry. And when somebody dies, then break down laughing. That's not the normal way of doing it. We're happy because of the thrill that it brings to the parents and the joy of a new person in life. And when somebody dies, it's more than just dying. If you could just die, and that's all that there is to it, it wouldn't be a big deal. But you do leave people behind. You do leave sadness. You do leave sorrow. You do leave jobs that other people have to do. There is a sadness that comes over death. But he said, it's better. Now, why? See, why is the day of your death better than the day you're born? It's the same thing as any other thing. And he'll mention this again, that the end of a thing is better than the beginning of a thing. Suppose you take somebody who has built, well, let's take Bill Gates since I mentioned him. He's built an empire down here. Now, let's take Jared back there, our resident computer expert. And so Jared says, I'm going to build me an empire. I'm going to build me a company. Instead of calling it Microsoft, I'll call it Soft Micro. But I'm going to do something. Well, hooray, Jared. Hurrah. Great. Are we going to celebrate? How big is the deal? You say, well, he just started it. That's the point. That's the point. Which one would you say has done the greater work in building an empire? Bill Gates, who has already accomplished it, or Jared, who's getting ready to start one tomorrow? Well, you would say, obviously, Gates. Well, why isn't that true of life? Here it is, somebody comes into life, and they're just starting it. Now think of all the things that child has to do. Suppose that child lives to be 80 years old. How many things will happen in that child's life? How many good things? How many bad things? How many accidents? How many things will other people bring upon them? How much sadness will they have? Think of all the things that happens to a child in the 80 years of their life. And so you look at it and you say, boy, there's a lot of happy days ahead, but there's a lot of sad days ahead. Will that child be able to remain faithful? Will that child be able to be successful? Now, on the other hand, you take a guy who's 80 and getting ready to die. Let's suppose that his life is successful. He's happy. He has done what he has the ability to do. He's finished his course. His life is a life of success. It's a life of faithfulness. Now, which is the best? Well, we'd have to say when you look at it like that, you understand it's the day of one's death. But that's hard for us to understand. That again is one of those things that we go through life and say, well, I don't think so. Look at the next. Better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. Now, the house of mourning would be what we'd call a funeral. It's better to go to a funeral, to a house where there is mourning, where somebody's died, and there's a lot of grief that is going on. It's better to go there than to the house of feasting. Now, we're at the end of the year where there'll be a lot of house of feastings. Going to be a party here, and a party over here, and a party to do this. And we're going to have a lot of parties at this time of the year. And in the next 2 weeks, the parties will be over. And so then I'm going to ask you, 3 weeks from today, what did you learn in the parties? How did it make you better? And so you think about it, especially when you're having a lot of fun, a lot of laughter. And you think, how is this improving me? How's it making me a better person? On the other hand, you go to a funeral. And when you go to a funeral, if you can become a better person, you will. And you say, why is that true? He tells us this. He said, for that is the end of all men. When you go to a funeral, you understand that you're there at the end of that person's life, and the living will take it to heart. So if you're still living, you can go to a funeral. It calls your attention to the fact that this is the end of a person's life, and then every person knows you are going to come to the same end. We've already learned that God said He set eternity in the heart of man. It doesn't make any difference who you are. You take a little baby, when a little baby is born, eternity is in their mind. I have no idea how it could be in there. Scott and I talking about it this last week. What is there? Well, God puts a conscience in that little kid's mind, and God puts the idea of eternity in that little kid's mind. Now, Scott's little boy has just been taken out, and he probably has been taken out to get a spanking. I have no idea. But here it is. He's there, about a year old, and he has a conscience. Now, that conscience is not working right now. It's being developed into the right kind of a conscience. But I thought I heard somebody call my name. But on the other hand, eternity is in that little boy's heart too. And you say, the idea of eternity is in Gus's heart? Yeah. You look at him and you say, he doesn't even think about 5 minutes in the future. And no, that's right. He doesn't think 5 minutes in the future. He'd crawl up here and stand up here and maybe fall off and be in danger of killing himself. And doesn't give it a minute's thought. But you watch that little boy. It doesn't make any difference how he's taught. His mom and dad will teach him there is life after death. But suppose that they teach him exactly the opposite. If he's a baby of an atheist, and they say, son, there is no life after death. There is no God. That boy will grow up, and he might become an atheist. He might become a hardcore atheist, but I'll guarantee you one thing. That boy will wrestle with the problem, is there life after death? I just wonder. Mom and Dad have said there is no God. My teacher says there is no God. I don't believe there is a God, but I'm going to die, and what happens after that? Every person has that set in their heart. And so he said, when you go to a funeral, that's the one time in your life that you're looking at a situation and you are examining yourself. So the next time that there's a funeral and you wonder whether you should go or not, and you say, well, I'm too busy to go, and that guy doesn't need me there anyway, he's already dead. You just stop to think, the best thing I could do for myself today would be to go to that funeral. That'd be the best thing that I could do. That's what Solomon says. And all of us know that when we go to a funeral, that's the way we think. Now this is life. See, this is the point and the reason I'm harping on it. The book of Ecclesiastes is about actual life. It's not about theoretical life. It's not about a theory. Do you suppose that this would happen? The book is about actual life. And so he tells us something. Now, I would rather go to a house of feasting, to a party, 1,000 times more than I would a funeral. But he says it's better to go to the funeral than to the party. He says then, sorrow is better than laughter. Boy, isn't that something? For by sad countenance the heart is made better. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools in the house of myrrh. Wow. Again, sounds so funny. A sad countenance, the heart is made better. It's better to have bad news, be sad, than it is to have great news and be happy. Well, why? It's because of the sadness that you're made better. That's where you have to wrestle with your problems. When you hear the sad news, you obviously go into shock. God made you that way. Wow. And so you start contemplating, and you start thinking, and you run it through your mind, and it goes and goes and goes and goes. And you're thinking about real life and real death. And whenever you come through it, I don't care what it is, doesn't make any difference what it is. If you go through it, you will come out a better person than you were when you went into it. That's hard for us to understand until we've actually seen it happen, that's there. I know that when my wife died, I read hundreds of books. And in these books, some people said that you're going to go through a period of grief, and you will come out a better person. Well, I didn't believe it at all. I thought it cannot be. The pain is so deep, it cannot be. And here's somebody writing a book and saying, you will come out a better person. Well, it depends on how you handle your grief, obviously. Some people don't handle it right and they come out a bitter individual. But if you handle it properly and you accept it and you go through it and you suffer for years and years, one day you can say, I'm a better person. And I remember this book, this lady, she made the statement. She said, in fact, she said, I don't even like myself the way I was. And I've wrestled with that. And she said, right now, after she had lost her husband and gone through the grief process, got married again, found happiness again, there was something that happened to her. There was a growth. There was something good happened. And she said, now, I look back and I don't even like myself before I lost him. Unbelievable. But I'm here this morning to tell you that's true. I can make the same statement myself now, and I would have denied it 1,000 times over. No. I learned so much. I suffered so deeply. But I learned so much that I'm 100 times better man than I was before I went through it. Now, this is just life. That's all we're dealing with. We're dealing with life. So when these things happen, all the bad news comes our way, just keep in mind, this is one way of which God helps us to really grow and really mature in dealing with what life is all about. He says in verse 5, it is better to hear the rebuke of the wise than for a man to hear the song of fools. For like the crackling of thorns under the pot, so is the laughter of the fool, and this also is vanity. So if you go to the party of fools, and you have lots of music and happiness and contentment, and I think of some of these things that I see on TV of people crowding in by the hundreds, by the thousands, standing room only, everybody yelling, jumping up and down, and the music is going and doing. That's what he's talking about here. And people on the stage jumping up and down, ripping off their shirts, yelling and screaming. Now, you might say, hey, isn't there a good in that? Yeah, it can be used in a good way. I'm not condemning everything about it, but I'm just telling you that as you look at that situation, this is what he's talking about. And what he says is, it's like going out and building a fire. Now, let me hasten to say this. This is one of those things that we in this generation cannot really appreciate. It's about building a fire. And having the comforts that we have. I teasing Helen a couple of nights ago about something. I forget now what it was, but anyway, she went to the kitchen and got me something, and I said, you know, that's the way Setting Bull's wife treated him. I said, he was sitting over there in the corner of his teepee, and she got up and went over, you know, and had to throw off her buffalo robe because that's all they had, one squaw, one buffalo robe. And so she threw it off. She went in, she brought it in to him, and then I remember she went back over and sat down by her fireplace again, just like Helen did. And you look and you say, it's unbelievable. Just a couple generations, and that's the way that it was. And we can't conceive of that right now. So we think of building a fire as camping when we're out camping. If we can't get the fire going well enough, we'll go in and get a motel. But with them, it was life or death. So now, he said, this is like this songs of fools is like the crackling of thorns. Now, if you go out and get a bunch of weeds and a bunch of thorns, and you start a fire, it starts easy, and it's the biggest fire that you've ever seen. You throw a bunch of them on, and that fire will go up 6 feet in the air, just flaming high. But as it goes up 6 feet in the air, it lasts just a few seconds, and then back down, and the fire goes out. Because there's really no heat in it. But you hear all the crackling. And that's what he's talking about here. The crackling, verse 6. For like the crackling of the thorns under the pot. As one guy I read put it, said, it would be the same today as translating it. The crackling of thorns under the kettle. Crackling and kettle. Trying to make a play on words. If you put weeds under a kettle, you're never going to get the water warm. But boy, it does crackle. That's the kind of fire that makes a lot of noise. And that's what he says. So we go through life taking all of these strange, vain things into our life. When we get through, we say, what have you accomplished? It's the same thing as somebody puts weeds under a pot and tries to boil the water. You say, boy, it crackled. It made a lot of noise, but it didn't do any good. So that's what Solomon is trying to teach us. He said, now, so is the laughter of the fool. This also is vanity. So happiness and laughter in these foolish situations is nothing but vanity. Surely oppression destroys a man's reason. Now, the word oppression right here, they tell me comes related to bribery. And if a person, a ruler, is oppressed by bribery, I guess is the way that you would put it, a lot of pressure put on him. Here it is, somebody comes in to this ruler, and they give him a great amount of money. Now, stop to think. When you get to thinking about rulers, today, in the light of TV and the news media, how often do we hear about rulers that have been bribed? Rulers that have made lots of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars by little shenanigans that are pulled around. He said, what happens in a case like this is that it destroys a wise man's reason. So when one of our leaders is bribed, it destroys his reasoning power. No longer will he be a good ruler. He can't think logically because he's got to think about the payoff and how do you pay back. And so it destroys his reasoning. And a bribe debases the heart. So it brings the heart down low rather than making it rise. Which would you rather be? You go to Congress and you have the opportunity of somebody coming in and they tell you, they never come in and say, I'll give you $1 million if you do this. They don't do that. They say, we'll make this law, I will do this or I'll do that. And so they go around in a different way. And can make you rich. It's just come out now about the situation of the stock market, and especially with Nancy Pelosi, and how that they make laws. And so they made some laws, and we're going to sign them in about the Visa card company a few years ago. So she knew that this was a great company. It was just coming in, what they call an IPO. So she went out and bought thousands of shares. And what do you know? The news media said she was able to be a good stock investor. She made $100,000 the first day. Now, it was not illegal. They point that out. It was not illegal, but there's your ruler. Gets this information, does this, not just on this one, but on lots of things that they have there. And so you think, well, what happens? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to get rich like that? Well, he said it debases the heart. How do you feel? How do you feel when you know that is what you are involved in? It's kind of like the criminal element of life. How do they feel? See, as far as their life is concerned. He says the end of a thing is better than the beginning. The patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. So here again, I read this, our time's about up, but I read this because the end of a thing is better than the beginning of a thing in here, and he repeats it again over and over and over. We find these things become true. Now, I'm not even going to talk about the other. That's where we'll begin our study next week. Thank you.